What's up, everybody, and welcome back once again to another episode of Upset Alert. It is episode number 70 of the Ultimate College Football Podcast, celebrating all 130 teams in FBS. Of course, that has been coming every episode lately, with the caveat that only 76 teams in FBS are scheduled to play this fall. However, we are 2 weeks deep at this point. So 2 weeks deep into FBS football this fall. And we've got a lot of games to talk about, right? It feels real finally that we are actually talking about real live college football games. Of course, the SEC, the last conference to join the party, will join us in just a little under 2 weeks now on September the 26th. But in the meantime, we have been enjoying some quality football games. As those of you joining us live on video on twitch.tv/robotbraineater are seeing this lovely highlight reel from Arkansas State and Kansas State. Of course, it was a big weekend right off the bat. We'll jump right into it. It was a big weekend for the Sun Belt, going 3-0 against the Big 12. There's a bigger discussion to be had that we'll get into later today regarding where does the Big 12 stand. And shout out to Overthinkable for the follow live in the stream here. Shout out AD Culture for the follow live in the stream, and shout out Nasty Amo or Nasty I Am O, I guess. In For the follow live in the stream as well. Shouts to all three of you for popping off for us early in the stream. Again, if you want to watch this podcast live, we stream twice a week on twitch.tv/robotbraineater here, talking about college football. Of course, I do other things. This is my personal Twitch, so I do other things here as well. But for now, we're talking about some college football, kind of week 2 in review, and then looking forward a little bit to what some of the broader conversation is for the Big 12, particularly, who had a bit of a rough week this week, and for the Sun Belt, who definitely stepped it up big time this week. So, just to kind of jump into things right here, before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's take a look over here to the Week 2 schedule. So this was the entire slate of games that was played this weekend, starting, of course, with UAB at Miami. So just kind of running through these games real quick and reviewing them. Miami looked pretty good in this football game. Actually, I thought I was a little bit pleasantly surprised, actually, by Miami. And not that I necessarily have a stake in Miami or anything like that, but just pleasantly surprised in that I wasn't really expecting too much out of the Hurricanes in this game. I expected it to be kind of a close back and forth affair. UAB is a team that I had high expectations for coming into this season. They looked a little lackluster in their week 1 matchup, and here they are at Miami Thursday, September the 10th. They didn't look particularly great in that one either. It started out as a decent game, I think, but Miami's rushing attack looks like the real deal, right? So the Miami Hurricanes actually might be for real, and we're going to find out a little more about that in next week. But of course, we'll get into the preview for the coming weekend on Wednesday or Thursday's episode, depending on how the schedule falls this weekend. But yeah, UAB didn't look particularly great in this one either. Honestly, Miami has a serious rushing attack. I don't know how much faith I have in De'Aaron King passing the ball downfield at quarterback still, but he is an athlete. He is a player, and he's going to go out there and make some big-time plays for this Hurricanes offense, as are their running backs. This was a pretty good win for Miami and a decent game to kick us off for the weekend on Thursday night. Saturday, jumping into it right here. Of course, we had the ACC joining the fray, the Big 12 joining the fray this weekend. So Clemson at Wake Forest, the first game we have listed on here. Clemson wins that one 37-13. Not a ton to talk about. Not really much excitement there. Maybe you'd like to see a slightly wider margin of victory for Clemson. I think that would be the expectation, perhaps. But you know, you can't knock it too much. I mean, the 37-13 win over a conference opponent on the road, especially in week 1, was such a weird offseason. We've said it before, we'll say it again. Clemson is just about as much of a known commodity as anyone in college football can be year in and year out, especially in this weird season. So Clemson getting the job done there. Missouri State, poor Missouri State, had the task of playing against Oklahoma, the number 5 Oklahoma Sooners. Oklahoma wins that one 48-0. Not really anything to say there. Spencer Rattler looks like an Oklahoma quarterback. He might be next in line to become at least a Heisman finalist, perhaps another Heisman Trophy winner. We'll see. That remains to be seen. A lot of football left to be played. But of course, Spencer Rattler is looking good passing the football, just as you would expect. Oklahoma is going to be another contender this year, it looks like. Duke at Notre Dame. This one was a little more interesting, at least. Number 10, Notre Dame in the AP poll, hosting the Duke Blue Devils, wins that one 27-13. Of course, this is Notre Dame's first year as a full-fledged member of the ACC in football, and probably their only one, at least for the foreseeable future. We'll see how things play out down the road. Notre Dame came into this game pretty high expectations, top 10 team. They're picked second in the conference behind Clemson, who's a perennial playoff team. So you come in thinking maybe Notre Dame's going to blow Duke out. Duke's a pretty bad team. Duke hung around, at least for the first half. Notre Dame pulls away a little bit late, but still only a 2-score win there. Again, with the weird offseason, I think you're giving everybody a little bit of a grace period to get adjusted. So I'm not going to knock Notre Dame too much for this, but maybe keep an eye on Notre Dame and see if some of those conference games that you expect them to run away with wind up a little closer than you might think. Number 14, Texas, the Longhorns hosting UTEP. This one went exactly like you would think it would go. If you've been following us on Twitter at Upset Alert Pod on Twitter, you've seen that I started off right with UTEP in that 76 spot, the worst team in college football for this fall. I gave them a little bit of a boost because they did pick up a win over an FCS opponent in week 1. So I had a couple teams drop below them. They're pretty much right back down there after this performance. Just a field goal against the Longhorns. Texas just beat the brakes off of the Miners of UTEP 59-3. Sam Ellinger puts up 426 passing yards. Just absolutely bonkers. Texas looked great on this day. They looked as polished as anyone who came out in this week here, in their first game of the season. We get an ACC matchup. This one was early in the day. North Carolina, another team with pretty high expectations, put them up there with Miami in the ACC in terms of their expectations. Number 18 in the country, hosting Syracuse. North Carolina wins this one comfortably. They got off to a bit of a slow start on offense. Winds up 31-6, though, a win for the Tar Heels. This is a good win. To me, North Carolina, like I said, started out a little bit slow. When I was watching this game, I was like, ooh, North Carolina does not look as good as people are thinking they might have been. But they really did turn things around in this football game, and turns out to be, I think, a really quality win for the Tar Heels. This is a team to watch out for in the ACC, along with Miami, along also, I think, with Virginia Tech. Those are going to be the teams to watch out for outside of Clemson and, of course, Notre Dame as well in the ACC. Those are going to be your two favorites until something happens to indicate otherwise in the ACC. Here comes our first big game of the weekend, right? And this was actually one that we had circled coming into this weekend, thinking that it could be a pretty good football game, not necessarily thinking it would go the way it did, though. The Louisiana Ragin' Cajuns at Iowa State. Now, we are talking about a ranked team in Iowa State, number 23 Iowa State on the AP poll. Now, I will tell you that for us here at Upset Alert, we had Iowa State because we're not ranking the Big Ten and Pac-12 teams and all those folks that aren't playing this fall. We had Iowa State at number 14 coming into this weekend, and Louisiana just looked like a much, much better team than the Cyclones on this particular day. So, like I said, I expected it to be a close game. I expect Louisiana maybe to find a way to win this one close, but they won by 17. This was a 31-14 game at Iowa State. Iowa State didn't even look like they belonged on the same field with the Ragin' Cajuns on this day. Louisiana was just outplaying them in pretty much every facet of the game. It's one thing for a Sun Belt team, a good Sun Belt team, mind you, to come on the road and beat a Big 12 team on some fluky blocked field goal, turnovers, fumbles, that kind of thing. That was not the case on this day. They were beating Iowa State on the offensive line. They were beating them on pretty much, like I said, every facet of the game. This was just the better team this weekend that won, and the Louisiana Raging Cajuns look like the real deal to the point that we have now moved them up, and you can see our full updated rankings on our Twitter at Upset Alert Pod on Twitter. We have moved them up to number 15 from a previously outside of the top 25 position. They were previously just outside of that top 25. We've elevated this team all the way to number 15 in the country for this preseason, or not even this preseason. We're 2 weeks into the season at this point, I suppose. But this is a great Louisiana Raging Cajuns football team. And at this point, with the way App State played this weekend, we're going to get to that in just a moment. I think you might even consider them the team to beat in the Sun Belt despite losing twice to App State last year. So let's get into that App State game because it is next on our order here. Charlotte at App State. App State struggled at times, okay? This was a real close game for a while against Charlotte, the 49ers. App State ultimately wins 35-20, but this is the defending Sun Belt champions, the team that only lost one game all of last year. Just the regular season loss to Georgia Southern, won the conference, including 2 wins, like I said, against Louisiana, a very good football team, won their bowl game last year. This is a real good App State team in terms of talent that they are returning. Of course, they have another new head coach this year. If you recall, when we had our Sun Belt expert Gabe Thomas, my good friend, on here to discuss App State football, he thinks that this is the year that having a third straight year of a first-year head coach is going to catch up with App State. He thinks it catches up with them this year and that they take a step back. He thinks it's Louisiana's year. I'm starting to come around. If Gabe is listening to this episode, I am coming around on Louisiana. I actually previously picked Arkansas State to win that division of the Sun Belt and play App State in that conference championship game. I am really starting early season already to rethink that. I like that Louisiana Ragin' Cajuns team a whole lot, and I am kind of iffy on App State right now, so I think that team could potentially beat App State and even take the Sun Belt crown this year. We will see. And in a year where there are less teams, just a smaller pool to choose from for a potential, dare I say it, college football playoff, is it possible for someone like Louisiana to get their name into the consideration? Is the American Athletic Conference the only one who would even be considered in that kind of scenario where a group of 5 team might go to that 4th seed? Who knows? Who knows? We'll hold off on that. It's only 2 weeks into the season. A lot of football left to be played. I'll fly through the next one here. Eastern Kentucky at West Virginia. West Virginia beat the brakes off of Eastern Kentucky 56-10. Big win there. Of course, that's about what you expect against an FCS opponent or a high-powered offense. We've got upset number 2 on here. Arkansas State at Kansas State. This was a really good back-and-forth football game. Unlike that Louisiana-Iowa State game where Louisiana pretty much dominated the whole way, honestly, at least most of the game, Arkansas State and Kansas State came down to the wire. The Red Wolves scored the game-winning touchdown with just under a minute remaining on there. The Wildcats being upset at home. Final score in that one, 35-31. Hats off to Arkansas State. You look really good as well. So there are some really good teams, I think, performing, if App State can get their stuff together, then those top three in the Sun Belt are a force to be reckoned with in App State, Arkansas State, and of course the Louisiana Raging Cajuns. Let's keep moving along here. UL Monroe at Army, not much to talk about here. Army wins 37-7 after last week winning 42-0 over Middle Tennessee. Shouts to the Army Black Knights. You look great. I actually like this team enough to bring them into our top 25 this week for our updated rankings. So just taking a look at our week 3 rankings, I have Army at number 25, right below App State, actually, who we were just talking about. So this team is right on the cusp, I think, of being a top 25 team right now after two very convincing performances in week 1 and 2. I'm giving it. I'm giving it to the Army Black Knights. So shouts to them. They look good so far. UL Monroe, not so much. We had UTSA at Texas State. This was actually one of the goofiest, craziest games of the night. UTSA and Texas State. Texas State had a decent lead for a little while in this one, and I picked the Texas State Bobcats in this game just because I liked the way they played in week 1. I thought they played with some heart, with a chip on their shoulder a little bit. This team, I don't believe, has ever won in this series, from my understanding. But, I liked Texas State to win this game for one reason or another. I was wrong. UTSA came back from being down a few touchdowns and ultimately takes it to double overtime, wins a shootout 51-48. And it was a fun game to watch if you get to catch the highlights of that one if you didn't see it already. We got another upset on here, this one not involving a Sun Belt school, shockingly. Georgia Tech at Florida State. Florida State making me look so stupid. When we did our full 12 game predictions and previews of every team in college football, I picked Florida State to go 9-3. What an idiot, right? How could I have been so stupid? Florida State, if we're doing our one game overreactions, they're not winning a game, right? They looked horrible. They looked horrible in this game. Their quarterback, where we've been led to believe is going to be much improved quarterback play, all of this. Blackman looked awful in this game. He made bad decisions. He took unnecessary sacks. He tried to force balls in there when he did get rid of the football. The offensive line is hot garbage at Florida State, as it has been for the last couple of years. Now, let's give credit where credit's due. Georgia Tech played their hearts out in this game. I didn't expect Georgia Tech to do much of anything in the ACC this year. They got picked 15th out of a conference that normally only has 14 teams. That pretty much should tell you all you need to know. I thought Georgia Tech was the worst team in the conference this year, them or Duke, and Georgia Tech looked great this week. It was nothing flashy, nothing fancy, but they played great defense against the Seminoles, and they went out there and got the job done, scored enough points. It was 16-13. The Ramblin' Wreck from Georgia Tech, and a hell of an engineer. Hurts me to even say those words as a Georgia Bulldog, as you all know that I am. But shouts to the Yellow Jackets. That's a good win. That's a good win to start off your conference schedule, especially Florida State. You've got to pick up the pieces and figure out what you've got. I like head coach Mike Norvell. I do have faith in him if they give him the time that he needs to build this culture. But it looks like he's going to have to rebuild it from the ground up because it is not looking good at Florida State right now. Speaking of places where it's not looking good, and I will give the shout out like I just did a moment ago. I give credit to my friend Gabe, right? I give credit to my friend Gabe for getting it right. It looks like on Louisiana, maybe it's their year. I hate to say it, Gabe. I think we might both be wrong about Georgia Southern. They might not be bouncing back so much this year. Now let's kind of water this down, give a grain of salt real quick. Georgia Southern was missing something like 30 players due to various, I guess, contact tracing. for players who were exposed to COVID-19. They were missing 8 starters, or 7 or 8 starters, I believe, in this game. But they were hosting FCS Campbell and squeaked out a win against them, 27-26. Campbell scored a touchdown late and missed the 2-point conversion. They were going for the win, not the tie. Didn't want to take it to overtime in Paulson against the Georgia Southern Eagles. But yeah, that's all you can say. This was an ugly win. One of the ugliest wins of the week belonged to Georgia Southern. There's another one that's equally ugly that we're going to get to in just a moment here. But I guess all the positive you can say about this really is, hey, Georgia Southern, you're 1-0. You are 1-0, and just move on from there, right? So let's move on from there indeed. South Florida hosting the Citadel. South Florida picks up the win 27-6. There's not much to say here. The Citadel, of course, is an FCS opponent. South Florida is a bad FBS team. They win this one by 3 touchdowns. That's about all you can ask of a team like South Florida this year, especially in week 1 where anything can happen. Yeah, moving along. South Alabama hosted Tulane. I picked South Alabama in this game. I liked the way they played in their first game of the year. I do like this Jaguars team a lot more than I thought I would at this point in the season. Tulane is a decent football team, though. You know, South Alabama was up by a couple scores in this one, and the Green Wave, one of the most iconic mascots in all of college football, came back to win it by a field goal, 27-24 for Tulane. So shouts to the Green Wave, getting that early season win over a what looks like maybe a decent South Alabama Jaguars team who shocked Southern Miss a week ago. Western Kentucky at Louisville. This one turned out to be a little closer than it looked like it was going to be early on, but shouts to the Louisville Cardinals. This is an explosive offense right here for Louisville. Of course, Cunningham getting in there with 343 passing yards was more than enough. Louisville picks up the win by 2 touchdowns over their in-state rivals, Western Kentucky. I like that in a year where some conferences at most are playing one game out of conference, I like that we still get kind of an in-state rival like this. Louisville and Western Kentucky. These games are always a lot of fun. There was a lot of points scored here, obviously, particularly on the Louisville side of the football, I suppose. But shouts to Louisville. I think they could be a pretty good football team. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, we get to see Louisville and Miami coming up in the coming week. And that is correct. Miami at Louisville is going to be one to keep our eye on this coming Saturday, the 19th. That is the 7:30 ABC game. So we'll kind of have an in-depth preview of that game on Wednesday or Thursday's episode. Again, I don't know yet if it's going to be recorded Wednesday or Thursday. We'll figure out as the week goes on. Houston Baptist at Texas Tech. Now this was the game that made Georgia Southern not quite look as bad, because Texas Tech, I think, is, being in the Big 12, normally you think of as being a better conference than the Sun Belt. But the Sun Belt certainly looked a lot better than the Big 12 on the whole this week. Taking a look at the top of the Big 12, there's no argument that teams like Texas, teams like Oklahoma, they showed out this week, right? Even West Virginia showed out this week. And they didn't play this week, but Oklahoma State, we think, is going to be very good. They didn't play this week, but we think Baylor is going to be pretty good. But look beyond that, some of the Big 12 teams just look awful right now. Awful, right? I mean, we're talking about Kansas State, who lost to Arkansas State. We're going to get to the third upset on here that I won't spoil yet. But Iowa State, of course, who was a ranked team, losing to the Louisiana Ragin' Cajuns. And now we've got Texas Tech squeaking out a win, 35-33 against Houston Baptist, an FCS opponent. This was as ugly of a win as you saw all week, right up there with the Georgia Southern win. I mean, one ball breaks the other way, and Texas Tech loses to an FCS team at home. That would be pretty bad. It was already an awful week for the Big 12. They looked horrible on, just at an overall level. And the Red Raiders could be real, real bad this season. They might be right down there with Kansas, who we transition right into here. Coastal Carolina, 1 year after upsetting Kansas at Coastal Carolina. And by the way, that was the first Power Five team ever to come play at Coastal Carolina last year when Kansas came and Coastal wins that game. This was a much more high scoring game, but Coastal, for the second year in a row, wins over the Kansas Jayhawks. All off season, every time I brought up Kansas, I said, I don't know what to make of Kansas because I don't know if Les Miles makes them a better team or not. I have my answer. He doesn't. I think Les Miles makes Kansas a worse team. They have very little going for them. They have Puka Williams, who is an all Big 12 running back. He is excellent. All right, this guy's a lot of fun to watch, but the rest of the team is awful. Pretty much a blanket statement that you can safely make is that outside of Puka Williams, Kansas doesn't have anything going for it, and that includes at the head coaching position. Les Miles' coaching philosophy was great at LSU 15 years ago. It has been awful since then. And this is just what it is, right? I mean, you know what you're getting out of a guy like Les Miles at this point. He's not changing, he's not improving. Um, it's really just a matter of stubbornness, I suppose, at this point, from Les Miles as the head coach. And as far as the team goes, they just don't really have any talent anywhere on the field. Kansas is real, real bad. Big surprise. And they fall to Coastal Carolina once again. Moving right along, our last game of the week on here, Austin Peay at Pittsburgh. There's not much to talk about there. Pitt wins 55-0 over Austin Peay. I would like to shout out Austin Peay and Central Arkansas. It seems like those guys have played against FCS opponents. They played against each other in the first FCS game of the year, and they both have played multiple FBS opponents now. So shouts to Central Arkansas and Austin Peay for holding it down, giving us some football to watch, even if it's not that quality football. Now, of course, like I was saying, we've got a lot to look forward to in week 3. It's gonna be the same conferences, but some slightly different teams. Some Big 12 folks that played this week are taking next week off, for example, and then some folks who didn't play this week are going to be playing next week. So Oklahoma State will play their first game next week. Baylor, I believe, is in there as well. And like I said, we do get that first kind of marquee matchup between what should be two ranked teams, at least they are in our rankings. Miami and Louisville will be an interesting one to watch out for. 7:30 on ABC this coming Saturday. We do have one Friday night game, no Thursday night game for this coming week, but one Friday night game, a full slate of Saturday games, and then, of course, the weekend after next, the SEC comes into the fold, and that will add a whole other level of excitement. One last bit that I am going to touch on here. We don't have any news to report on it yet. I'm sure it'll break as soon as we post this episode. But the Big Ten is what appears to be serious discussions about joining the college football fray for the fall. The Big Ten appears to be, again, in serious discussions. We don't know anything really for sure, right? It's hard to say. But the Big Ten appears to be thinking about playing college football at some point this fall. Now, whether that means starting in October sometime, starting in November, whatever it may be, I would like to go on record and say I'm all for it. If the Big Ten does decide to join the fray, let's figure out a way to include them in whatever this adapted college football playoff situation is going to be. If they need to only play 8 games, so be it. I'm going to be straight up with you. I don't need Ohio State to play 10 games or 12 games for me to know that they're one of the 4 best teams in the country. They just are. So if you get an 8 game schedule in or something like that, I am perfectly fine with that. Even if it means my team being excluded or something like that, I'm more than happy to accommodate the Big Ten in whatever way is possible. You're only really hearing talks like this out of the Big Ten, nothing really, radio silence out of the Pac 12. They do not seem interested in playing football this fall. Same thing for the Mountain West Conference and the MAC. You're just not really hearing any rumblings like that, like you are with the Big Ten. But that's about going to wrap us up for episode number 70 of Upset Alert, talking about the Fun Belt going 3-0 against the Big 12 this weekend and so much more. For those of you who are listening on podcast services around the world, when this posts later on today, make sure to give us a like or a subscribe, a follow, whatever it is on your podcast service of choice. And if you do have the time, I appreciate you leaving us a 5-star review. Helps us get more eyeballs and more ears on the podcast. If you want to join us live like Overthinkable, AD Culture, and Nasty I Am today, then hit us up at twitch.tv/robotbraineater. Again, there's all kinds of additional content on there, me playing video games and talking over them, stuff like that, because that is my personal Twitch channel. But if you want to see the podcast live, that's the place to do it. You can hop in the chat, give us your comments on everything in the world of college football, and I'll be more than happy to read those comments out on the show. If you want to just drop us a line at Upset Alert Pod on Twitter as well, whether it's about what I said on this episode about the Sun Belt, the Big 12, whatever it may be, or if it's just something about college football in general, about life, then drop us a line on there at Upset Alert Pod on Twitter, and I'd be more than happy to read it out on the show and give you a little shout out on there. So again, I want to thank you guys so much for tuning in to episode 70 here to talk a little Sunbelt football with us. We will see you on either Wednesday or Thursday, TBD at this point. Until then, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and we will see you later.